Dylan in the jail.
She's among the world's most infamous young female killers.
I want to go to the beach today. Let's go to the beach.
And yet, incredibly, for Chicago-born Heather Mack, this is life behind bars. With access to her own social media account, she posts video of herself smoking, dancing, even partying, all while trying to raise her baby Stella inside Indonesia's Karabokan, one of the most notorious prisons on the planet.
1, 2.
Matt Dorn has traveled thousands of miles to Bali to speak with Heather behind bars. It's an exclusive, explosive interview that will leave you questioning all you thought you knew about the teen killer convicted of slaughtering her own mother during their family vacation.
To the extent that you can remember, what can you tell me about your mother's final moments?
She just went nuts, and she was just screaming and telling me that that was when I was going to die, that was when I was going to die.
The full chilling interview later. But first, how on earth did a pregnant 19-year-old who grew up in a wealthy Chicago family end up here?
Oh my God.
Paraded before the world as a money-hungry murderer, an American teen once facing an Indonesian firing squad for her role in the brutal killing of her own flesh and blood.
Did you feeling stressed these days, lately?
Stressed? Yes.
Half a world away and a virtual lifetime ago, Heather Mack was just a sweet little girl full of promise. The pride and joy of famed jazz composer James Mack and his wife, academic socialite Sheila von Wiese-Mack.
She grew up in a very nice house, and she had, from all accounts, a privileged upbringing.
Of course, they doted on her. She was a precious little baby girl and my sister's first, only child. She felt so blessed and lucky, and it was a really wonderful family.
Heather's dad, Jim, Heather was his princess. And
his little baby girl, yeah,
he just loved her. I mean, they both did.
But sadly, when Heather was just 10 years old, her dad received a diagnosis that would change everything.
He ended up getting colon cancer, and they were on a trip, and he actually died over in Greece. It was devastating.
After that, 3 became 2, and the wheels of fate began spinning a little faster.
From the outside, at least, this looked very much to be the family who had everything, including this sprawling $1.5 million home in Chicago's historic Frank Lloyd Wright district. But inside, all was not as it seemed. In fact, Sheila's relationship with her young daughter was explosive.
In the decade after her dad's death, perhaps understandably, Heather began acting out more and more.
I felt that Heather, after her father died, began to slowly see her mom as a bit of a competitor for attention.
As she got into middle school, she was becoming, very defiant and not wanting to listen to any rules. And Sheila and I had many, many talks, and I said, there's a reason the term troubled teen is out there.
But did Heather's troubles go beyond that of a normal teen? She started skipping school, hanging out with a rougher crowd, and even began stealing large sums of money from her own mom.
What did Sheila tell you about what was going on behind closed doors?
Well, she told me that she was being abused by Heather. I mean, she was constantly being attacked physically, and Heather had an explosive temper. I mean, there's no question about that. She would erupt at the slightest provocation.
In fact, over a 10-year period, police were called here on reports of domestic violence more than 80 times.
She would bite Sheila, she would hit her, and it was
to the point of
bruising.
Sheila sustaining serious injuries?
Well, Heather pushed her one time in the bathroom, and she fell and broke her arm.
And yet Sheila still tried to keep her daughter close.
And she wouldn't press charges. I mean, it's a really hard thing to do when it's your own child. And I would, talk to her about, you've got to start treating your mom with respect. You've got to start going to school. You can't, you can't do this anymore, Heather. You're taking years off my sister's life.
But Debbie had no way of knowing then how prophetic those words would become. In a now haunting email Sheila once sent to her friend Elliot Jacobson, she wrote,
Heather was violent tonight and left. Very scary for me, and I am always worried about her. I'm really scared of what she may do next.
With the family dynamic at a breaking point, the Macks looked to Bali as their salvation.
This vacation was a reset to bond between mother and her daughter and try to rebuild this relationship from the ground up.
Instead, this beautiful place would become the setting for an unthinkable act of violence that would tear the entire family apart.
They flew here business class, over $10,000 a ticket, and checked into pretty lavish rooms at the 5-star St. Regis Resort.
It was supposed to be just the two of them, repairing that sacred bond between mother and daughter. But authorities say Heather had other plans that involved her boyfriend, Tommy Schaefer.
What we know about Tommy is that he grew up in a single-parent household. He did have a tight group of friends from middle school on, but that group started to distance themselves from Tommy because he started to tell tall tales and he liked to exaggerate the truth.
Can you tell me about the insight that Sheila would give to you about Tommy once he came on the scene?
She hated him.
Yeah?
She thought he was a bad influence.
Unfortunately for Sheila, that so-called bad influence was about to get involved in some very bad things indeed. It looked every bit the perfect family vacation. Sheila von Wiese-Mack and her daughter Heather checked into these near $1,000 a night rooms at the St. Regis Resort in Bali's upscale beach paradise, Nusa Dua.
I've looked at a lot of those photographs of Sheila and Heather on holidays together, and they are part of one of the things about this case that just kind of crushes me, to be honest, because there is no indication that there is an enormous rift between these two. They look like happy mum and daughter.
Right.
Don't they?
They sure do. They sure do. There's not a single indication that would indicate there was any problem between the two.
But behind these seemingly happy vacation photos, a dark plan was developing. To Sheila's surprise, less than 2 weeks into the trip, Tommy Schaefer, Heather's boyfriend, suddenly arrived on a $12,000 flight from Chicago.
She had no idea Tommy was coming.
In fact, if anything, Sheila had wanted Heather to come on the trip to get her away from people she considered bad influences.
The last person in the world she wanted to see in Bali was him. And so then the question is, well, how did he get there? I mean, it's $12,000 for an airplane ticket.
But Sheila would soon find out, in addition to the room he'd been staying in, Tommy's entire trip was being financed by a credit card Heather had taken from her mom. By all accounts, Sheila was livid.
And do you blame her? She was there to reconnect with her daughter, and all of a sudden, this boyfriend, who she doesn't like, shows up on her dime. That must have been infuriating.
Sadly, whatever anger Sheila felt would be short-lived. Roughly 10 hours after the wheels of Tommy's plane hit the ground in Bali, surveillance cameras capture him entering Sheila's hotel room with the handle of a metal fruit bowl stuffed under his shirt. About an hour after that, Heather and Tommy are seen heading to the lobby with a silver suitcase, which they place in the back of a taxi before running off. It's not until the driver takes the abandoned luggage to the police station that they find out what's inside. The bloodied, half-naked body of Sheila von Wiese-Mack. She had been bludgeoned repeatedly before asphyxiating on her own blood. So where were Tommy and Heather?
For just less than a day, the media painted this pair as a modern-day Bonnie and Clyde, young American fugitives wanted for a particularly brutal murder. But their time on the run would end here, at this budget motel less than a mile from the crime scene, staff alerting police after becoming suspicious that the lovers had checked in without any luggage.
What does that say to anyone who's looking at this evidence? It doesn't say this happened accidentally. This says, we don't want to be caught, we're going to try to get away.
In custody, Heather had an entirely different story.
Heather and Tommy told the story that an armed gang had abducted all of them, and the armed gang had killed Sheila.
But during their investigation, police find a pair of cell phones containing a digital trail leading right to Sheila's final moments on Earth.
I mean, that's the key. That's the magic bullet that opens up the case.
Messages obtained by Crime Watch Daily indicate Tommy never went to Bali for a holiday. In those texts to a Chicago cousin named Robert Bibbs, Tommy reveals he and Heather meticulously designed Sheila's murder. Tommy, that expletive Heather is crazy. Huh? She asked me to do something really insane. She asked me to find someone to kill her mom for $50K. And that was a full 6 months before the murder. In even more messages sent just weeks and even days before Bali, Tommy and Bibbs discuss smothering the socialite with a pillow or even drowning her in the ocean to make it look like an accident. The motive? Tommy says it's all so he and Heather can inherit Sheila's fortune. Once Tommy finally landed in Bali, the endgame began.
Police reports indicate that there was then a flurry of text messages between Heather and Tommy, basically trying to map out how this murder was going to play out.
Heather and Tommy were text messaging back and forth after Sheila and Heather had gone back to their suite.
Initially, though, as these texts reveal, the plan was for Heather to kill her mother herself. Tommy writes, "Try your best. Can you whack her in the head with a big-ass pole?" Mack responds, "Can you?" Tommy, "Yes, come in the hallway right now." Heather, "Too dangerous not to do it. Gee, you have to come in." Tommy, "Here I come."
At one point, Tommy brings a fruit bowl, a glass fruit bowl with a metal handle, to the room.
The very one used to beat the life out of Sheila. It's believed that once he came into the suite, Tommy hid in the bathroom while Heather waited for the right moment, still texting as she did. "Plan?" Heather asks. Tommy responds, "She's so awake, I gotta hit her." Heather, "Can we suffocate her together? Is that thing hard enough? What if she doesn't KO?" And then in the last few texts the two would send before the crime, they write, "Let me just creep up and whack her. Once I do it, she was drunk and slipped and fell." Heather, "Okay, just knock her out. It'll be much easier."
Tommy and Heather then tried to cover this murder up by stuffing Sheila's body into a suitcase, wrapping it up in duct tape, and trying to put it into a taxi, and then they run off.
I mean, I just can't wrap my head around the way she died and what they did to her poor, sad, pathetic, dead body, and stuffing it into a suitcase. And I look at a suitcase differently from that moment on. And I still travel, but it's there. It's always there.
While America's new Bonnie and Clyde avoided the death sentence,
They thought he was gonna run!
a panel of Indonesian judges did find them guilty of murder. Heather given 10 years in prison, Tommy 18.
Do you think this is a young woman who regrets what she did?
We're asking her, don't you feel sorry for your mom that she already gone? Yeah, I did. And she's crying at the time.
Many back in the States and indeed around the world aren't buying the remorse. A crime so sinister and brutal, it seems only a monster could perpetrate such heinous acts. But then every story has two sides, and this one was about to take a surprising twist.
Heather is so desperate to tell her story. She wants to Skype me.
Inside this small silver suitcase, the brutalized body of Sheila von Wiese-Mack, mother to then 18-year-old Heather Mack. The girl now serving time in a Balinese prison for orchestrating her mom's murder with her boyfriend, Tommy.
What motivated this crime?
All her statements really suggest that she's motivated by money. She didn't want to work. She wanted to live the life she's always lived. That doesn't answer the question as to why did the money become more important than the life of her mother.
Ultimately, there was only one person who could answer that question, the killer herself.
We're on our way now to the place sometimes referred to as Hotel K, Kerobokan Prison. She's agreed to see me as a visitor, so we're about to get a sense of what life is really like for an American murderer inside this notorious facility.
Unfortunately, we weren't able to get access inside of the prison, but we were still able to reach Heather for a few seconds by Skype before the reception went out, and then again by phone.
She so desperately wants to tell me her side of this story. Let's give it a go.
Hello?
Heather, it's Matt.
Yes. Hello,
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay, great.
One of the first things we wanted to ask her about, these now infamous images, many of them selfies taken from inside the prison, showing what appears to be Heather having the time of her life.
A lot of people might look at you, Heather, and say,
This is a young woman, a young killer, they might say, with too many freedoms. It's been reported that you spend your days partying, that you're caught up in a salacious lesbian threesome in there, and basically you've got everything that you could want on the outside. Is there any truth to that?
I don't party. How would I party in a prison? You know, sometimes I listen to music, but I don't spend my days partying. I spend my days taking care of my daughter.
And to many, that might come as a surprise. Heather Mack is now the mother of a 2-year-old girl named Stella, a baby fathered by her co-conspirator, Tommy Schaefer. In fact, in details she says she's revealing for the first time only to us, Heather claims her pregnancy, along with Tommy's surprise arrival in Bali, are the 2 main factors that led to her mother's death. Now, with her baby in her lap, she tells us that story.
So Tommy rolls up and what, your mum just explodes?
Well, she didn't know at first. She was asleep, and of course I left the room. I snuck off to the beach with him, and she woke up, and that's when she went to the reception, and they said Tommy Schaefer checked in under your credit card, and she just went nuts. I just said, let's go to the room. When we went to the room, we went to sleep.
From there, she says, things only got worse.
I went to Tommy's room, and I just said, I don't know what to do. And he said, let me talk to her. And he looked at me and said, okay. And he came down, and it just escalated again.
To the extent that you can remember, what can you tell me about your mum's final moments?
This isn't even in the court transcript.
The point of no return came, Heather says, when she finally made that big announcement that she was pregnant with Tommy's child.
She was so angry. I told her I was pregnant, and she went around the room looking for a knife, and she was just screaming and screaming and telling me that was when I was going to die, that was when I was going to die. And I said, Tommy, help me. And Tommy walked over to her, and she went and she grabbed Tommy's neck, and it wasn't hard. That Tommy could have shoved her off. Tommy could have run away. Tommy's a very strong man, but I was just screaming and screaming and screaming, and he just smacked her. Smacked her, smacked her, smacked her over and over and over and over and over. And I ran to the bathroom. I said, Tommy, what are we going to do? Tommy, what are we going to do? Tommy, what are we going to do?
What they did was wrap Sheila's body in duct tape and stuff her into a suitcase. But before we get to that, we wanted to try and understand how the relationship between mother and daughter got so bad in the first place.
I mean, give me an insight into what your childhood was like.
Yeah, it was not very healthy at all. My mother was an alcoholic. She was also diagnosed with multiple personality disorder. And the thing with my mother is that she just didn't want me. She didn't want Heather Mack how Heather Mack was.
Heather confirms things got only worse after her dad died, but says that even before that, it was a violent home life.
So I became extremely close to my father, and that also made her mad, and that drove her nuts, because I took her husband away from her. She would say something that hurt me. I would come home from school crying, tell my dad would hit her. Then she would hit my dad. Then I would see her hit my dad, and I would hit her. Then we would both hit her. And then it was just a pattern over and over and over and over and over until my father died, and then it got worse.
How do you mean?
Especially when I was pregnant. I was pregnant before Stella. She just went nuts. She would chase me around the house until 3, 4 in the morning with a knife, with a kitchen knife, just saying, get the out of that room. Get the out of that room, you slut, before I have to stab the baby out of your stomach. Over and over, all night.
Shocking assertions, but Heather says it was this background that led her to where she is today.
That was where all the anger came from. I had all the toys and the money I wanted, but that isn't what makes a child happy. And I was extremely angry because of what was going on in my household. I go to school because I was up taking care of my drunk mother.
I understand.
So that's where all the anger, until now, I still have anger.
But then, Heather swears it wasn't any sort of callous anger that led to one of the most gruesome aspects of the crime.
What she does is fold her mother up like an accordion and put her into a suitcase. Unbelievable, with blood everywhere.
She was already dead, and I just was mental. And I was just hugging her and hugging her and hugging her. And I wouldn't let her go. And he just said, now we have to run. And I said, you are nuts. I'm not leaving my mother here. I will not leave her here. And he said, what the do you want to do? I said, I want to bring her. He said, in what? And I said, in a suitcase. I'm not leaving her here. I just didn't want to leave my mother. I don't know. I have no idea where Heather Mack was at that moment.
But Heather says she knows precisely where she is now.
Most of the time, especially at night, I'm crying. Especially at night.
Can I ask you why you cry at night?
I miss my mother. Yeah, I miss my mother.
A lifetime of dysfunction, a surprise announcement, a tragic accident. Heather's series of events certainly paint a very different picture than the one the media has portrayed. But we still had a few questions, like how much of this was true? Dear Elliot, Heather ran off a few hours ago and she cannot be located. I'm more frightened than ever. I will keep in touch. This email, written by Sheila von Wiese-Mack, was sent to her friend Elliot from her vacation resort in Bali. 3 days later, she was dead.
How does it kind of affect you?
It really plagues me because I wasn't perceptive enough to see where this could lead.
But in our own exclusive interview with the girl convicted of the murder, Sheila's own daughter, Heather, she expresses remorse and says it was only after her mom attacked her that she and Tommy committed the act.
I know, it's an unexplainable. I don't forgive myself. I'll probably never forgive myself.
But does the evidence support Heather's version of events?
It's one thing in the heat of the moment, in a violent exchange, to kill your own mother, but it's another thing entirely to map it out and for this to have been premeditated. So which was it?
I think it was half premeditated, half not. In my head, I never thought it was going to actually happen.
But police say there's a series of text messages, Heather, which go to that very motive, premeditation.
Yeah, the text messages are such. I'll wait till. Wait, there's somebody hitting the block. Can I play right back?
Sure.
Matt?
Yes, of course. You want to call me back?
That call never came. We would lose contact with Heather after those final words. But we still wanted to know what the people who best knew Sheila had to say about it all. Just how much could be believed.
She lied about virtually everything she said in there.
And when we played Heather's interview for Sheila's brother and sister, Bill and Debbie, they had even more to say. First, about the part where Heather says it was Sheila who attacked first.
I told her I was pregnant. She went around the room looking for a knife.
Wow.
Well, one of the first statements she made in there was that she told Sheila that she was pregnant. Well, Sheila knew that clearly before they left for Bali. So Sheila would not go into a rage if she already knew about the pregnancy before they even left.
Even more proof Sheila already knew about Heather's pregnancy? Yet another email sent to her friend Elliot not long before the trip to Bali.
So she writes me, Heather just came home to my apartment. She stole my cell phone and my home phone. She is 8 weeks pregnant, I am told. What can I do? This is August 1st.
Well, this is August 1st, 2014. So this is what, 2 full weeks before the murder, she knew black and white that Heather was pregnant. So it cannot then have been the trigger for the motive, if you like.
No.
So then why would she say those things?
Is this a very manipulative young woman, you believe?
Oh, I believe, yes. She was very manipulative at a young age. Very smart, and she really could manipulate her mommy and her daddy. It got worse as she got older.
In fact, there is now evidence Heather manipulated Tommy into helping her with the crime. In these texts between the two, Heather tells Tommy, quote, "You just gained $11 million. Tommy's response? Feels like I'm in a dream when you said that. $11 million? Too good to be true, LOL. Too good to be true, it turns out, because it was.
And what was the trust actually worth?
It was a little over $1.5 million total.
Which is still nice, but it's not $11 million.
It's not $11 million.
And when we played Sheila's family Heather's account of her violent upbringing,
with a knife?
more lies, according to the family.
Listening to what Heather's talking about there when she describes her childhood.
I can't believe, she said that just because I was up there. She had lots of love. That's a total manipulation.
This is the first time you've heard any of these claims?
Any of this.
Yeah, I've never heard anything like that.
This.
If the violence is to the extent that Heather is describing, that there would have to be at least some record of it somewhere throughout the childhood.
Well, with 86 police reports, you think it would be in one of those if anything like that were happening. And I read all of those, and I didn't see any of that in those.
Debbie and Bill also say their sister never had a problem with drugs or alcohol, as Heather has alleged. But then, really, when it comes to Heather, there's not much they do believe.
It must be chilling and unimaginably hard to hear her describing what actually took
to hear
place.
her voice, it's really hard to hear my sweet niece who I've known for my life. I feel like this is her stage right now. This is the biggest stage she'll ever have, and she's going to act her way through whatever she needs to.
And yet, for as truly horrifying as their crime was, this is where Heather Mack now serves her time. Dancing, smoking, seemingly spending carefree days in her Balinese prison. Justice?
Does it aggravate you seeing the freedoms that she enjoys in this Balinese prison?
Yeah, she's dancing on her mother's grave. From Heather's point of view, it was not a murder at all. It was a deletion, as if you would delete a paragraph from a computer. I would like to see Heather Mack put on trial in the United States, and if she is found guilty, to be sentenced to no less than 50 years in jail, no possibility of parole, where she has to go to work, either cleaning the toilets, making license plates, 6 days a week, for 50 years with no possibility of parole.
A far cry from where she is now.
Camping.
She's over there kind of living the good life, so to speak.
I feel like she's a rock
prison.
star. Yeah, a rock star. The pictures of her that she posts and the comments, I mean, it's like a party for her. I feel like in my heart she loved her mother, but then how can you love your mother and be involved in such a horrific murder of her?
But I mean, that's the heart of this, isn't it? How have you resolved that in your own minds?
I don't know if I'll ever resolve it.
Is there any genuine remorse there? Any at all?
I haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it, which breaks my heart.
As for Heather's inheritance, Sheila's family is currently fighting that in court, trying hard to amend that trust so the money goes to Heather's daughter, Stella. It seems for now one of the few provable truths in this whole case may be that a woman is dead, murdered in the eyes of the law by the very person she brought to life.
The last people my sister saw in those last couple minutes of her life was her own daughter and her daughter's boyfriend. I mean, I can't believe that that's what were her last couple minutes. I can't grasp it at all, and I never will be able to. They took the person that I loved so much, not just my sister, my best friend, for no reason. It's heartless. Just heartless.